So this is one question that you frequently get. And it's a very typical question. You get this in every exam. Why are they colored? So the reason was that you have a d subshell, which was where's the d subshell? So you had a d subshell, and there were 5 different orbitals in the d subshell. Let me just copy this. Just a second. So you had 5 d orbitals. These are your 5d orbitals. Now remember, the 3d was the inner shell. It wasn't the outer shell. If copper ions attract ligands, they attract water molecules from all sides. Then the lone pairs are attracted. The outer shell is completely empty. Copper 2 plus loses the outer shell. Every metal, when it forms an ion, it loses the outer shell electrons. The D is the inner shell. The 1s, 2s, 2p, 3s, 3p, they're all electrons that are residing near the nucleus, not on the outside. So the lone pairs are all on the outside. The water molecules, the ligands are all on the outside. And you've got this D subshell, which is also on the inside near the nucleus. The D has 5 sets of orbitals. 3 of them, the electron density lies between the axes in different planes. 2 of them, the electron density lies exactly on the axis, where in the dx square minus y square, the electron density lies on the x and y axis, or yahan pe na, it lies on the z axis. So I've drawn overlapping d orbitals over here just to show them. It's not a 3-dimensional representation, just to give you an idea that you've got electron densities you've got electrons that are lying between the axes, you've got electrons that are lying on the axis. The green ones are the ones which are lying on the axis, like this. The pink ones are the ones that are lying between the axes. So you've got a total of 5 orbitals that can accommodate a maximum of 10 electrons. Now, all these 5 orbitals, the d orbitals, they're identical. I mean, they're all identical. Just like the px, py, and pz, they're all identical, except that the direction or the orientation of the electron is different. Otherwise, the energy levels are exactly the same. But what happens is that when it forms a complex and you got all these lone pairs coming in, so here's this first water molecule coming in and just making its size bigger. So the lone pairs come in. Now, when the water molecule approaches the copper 2 plus ion, the copper 2 plus ion is going to attract the lone pairs. Then, because of these lone pairs, the one that you see over here, so because of these lone pairs in pink, the electrons that are residing in the green orbital over here, they are going to face some sort of repulsion. So you can see all the water molecules, their lone pairs are coming. I mean, they're all lying on the axis. So you got this. So you got this other water molecule. And because of this water molecule, there's going to be repulsion in this green orbital, which is, just 1 second, the board is. So it's going to face repulsion in this green orbital. There would be a lot more repulsion. The pink orbitals, the ones where the electron is lying between the axes, they would face lesser repulsion. So all these lone pairs of water molecules, they're all approaching on the axis, and they would cause some sort of repulsion. So the arrow just represents that the lone pairs are going to repel the electrons that are residing in the green orbitals over here. So all the water molecules coming on the axis. Previously, all the d subshells were exactly the same, but now the green ones face more repulsion. Is this point clear, this first point?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so imagine a copper ion attracting all these ligands and all the ligands approaching on the axis, forming an octahedral complex. And previously, all 5 orbitals were exactly the same. They had exactly the same energy level. The pink ones and the green ones were exactly the same, but now they're not the same. It's a lot easier to keep electrons in these pink ones. And it's going to be slightly difficult to keep electrons. I mean, you had 9 electrons in the D. I mean, there were electrons that were within the close to the nucleus. But it would be a lot harder to keep electrons in the green ones. So this is what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that the D subshell is going to split up. Just hold on a second. So this is what's going to happen. Just 1 second, the board is loading. That this D subshell over here, just a second. So this D subshell over here, with its 5 orbitals, the 3dxy, 3dxe, all of them, the ones that you see in the picture. 3dxc, you had a 3dyz lying in the yz plane. You can just hold on a second. It's not. Let me reload the board. Channel this one. Okay, hopefully it's working now. The D. So yeah. Now the D, the 3dxy, 3dxc, you had the 3dyz, and then you had the 3dx square minus y square, the ones that lie on the axis, and then you had the 3d z square. So what will happen now is that previously they were identical, they had exactly the same energy level. Which is why you gave them a specific name. You started calling them degenerate orbitals. Degenerate orbitals are the ones that have exactly the same energy level. But once a complex is formed, that's no longer going to be true. Once a complex is going to be formed, the orbitals would split up. So now it would be a lot harder to keep electrons in the green ones on the axis, and it would be a lot easier to keep electrons in the pink ones over here. So a lot harder to keep electrons on the axis. So 3dx square minus y square, the electron has to be a lot more energetic to be there. And because it has to face a lot of repulsion. So the 3dx square minus y square and the 3dz square, the green ones, the ones where the electron is lying on the axis, faces a lot more repulsion, and the electron has to be more energetic so it could overcome the repulsion that it faces from the lone pairs that the ligands are bringing in. And it is a lot easier to keep electrons. So the electron is going to prefer the spaces between the axes, the 3dxy, 3dxz, and the 3dyz. So it's going to prefer those orbitals. So these ones over here are your low energy orbitals now. It's a lot easier to keep electrons here. And these ones over here at the top are your high energy orbitals, where the electron has to be a lot more energetic to stay in those orbitals. So which is why the D is now no longer degenerate. It's got 2 separate energy levels, and there's going to be this energy gap that's going to exist between them. there's going to be this big energy gap, which is going to be, let's call that delta E. So the electrons, the 9 electrons, remember how many electrons did the D have? It had 9 electrons. So the 9 electrons are going to first fill up the spaces in the pink ones, the middle ones, and then the remaining electrons are going to fill up the spaces, the green ones. The green orbitals are going to get filled up. So the electronic configuration is going to look something like this. It's going to be 9 electrons. So first, the bottom ones are going to get filled up because it's easier to keep electrons there. And the remaining, how many electrons do you have left? You've got 3 of them. So there's going to be 2 electrons and 1 electrons over there. So that's how 9 electrons in the D would look like once a complex is formed. So is this clear so far?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Sam, is this clear? Nadine, is this clear? Now the next part, so where are colors coming from? Okay, that's the big question. Where are you getting those colors? Why are they colored? Now the thing is, and remember, this happens with every complex. Whenever a transition metal forms a complex and these ligands come in, the D subshell is going to get affected by that. So let's talk a bit about colors. I mean, what's with this colors, TK? So the thing is, there's nothing special about colors specifically. The only problem is, let me just give you a brief introduction about colors. Like, what do we mean when we say we see some colored substance? So the answer to that is, there's nothing special about that. Whether you see something that is white, or whether you see something that is red or orange or blue or green, or you see absolutely no color at all. I mean, there's nothing special about that. The thing is that there's this huge electromagnetic spectrum. I mean, you must have studied that, and this is what the electromagnetic spectrum looks like. I'll just Google it. So you've got all sorts of frequencies. So this is one. I'll just copy this one. Exactly, Sam. Because they no longer degenerate. They no longer have exactly the same energy level. So now coming back to colors. So the thing is, you've got this huge electromagnetic spectrum. There are all sorts of waves traveling around you. Now, the perception of color is just a human perception. I mean, it's got nothing. I mean, there's nothing out there specifically that is colored. The only thing is, like, when you see red, it's just you. It's just a human being that's seeing red. I mean, another animal might see something totally different. So the thing is, perceiving color is just a human thing, because there are all sorts of radiations and waves and electromagnetic waves out there. You don't see microwaves. There might be some animal that would be able to actually see or perceive microwaves. We're not able to do that. So you've got all sorts of waves, all sorts of frequencies, and we are not able to actually see most of them. So these frequencies, apart from the visible spectrum, I mean, you can't see these, you can't see any of these. A dog might be able to actually see a lot more frequencies compared to a human being. So the thing about colors is, and the perception of colors is, it's just a human perception. That's it. So you're able to just perceive these specific frequencies, which I think it's not given over here, but it's somewhere around 450 nanometers to, I mean, the wavelength is 450 nanometers to 700 nanometers. We can just quickly, if frequencies are given somewhere, just a second. So this is, yes. So this one, so we are able to see this tiny spectrum. It's 4 into not given properly. Just a second. Visible spectrum. I'll just write that down. So the visible spectrum frequency 400 nanometer to 700 nanometer. The blue is 400 nanometers. The red one is, so these are the wavelengths. So I'll just write those wavelengths. So the blue, which one was the bigger one? Just a second. Blue was 400 nanometers. You don't have to remember this. It would probably be given in most questions. And this is 700 nanometers. So you've got all these ranges. So you can only see these wavelengths, that's it. Now, the other thing is, when you see a color, what's happening? What's usually happening is when you see a color, for example, there's this object and this object is red in color. So let's say, let me just color this. So when we see an object and it's red in color, okay, you can see this red colored object over here. So what you're actually seeing is, I mean, the question is, what's the color of this particular object? So what's happening is, around you, you've got all sorts of light that's falling onto this object. That's known as white light. White light is basically just all the frequencies added up together. So that's what white light is. So all frequencies, all sorts of visible spectrum frequencies, the ones that you can see and the ones that you can't see. So all frequencies are falling onto this object. And if you talk about colored frequencies, you can remember VIBGYOR, which is violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. So all these frequencies. Now, if there's a person standing over here and the frequencies are going to bounce off of this object and he's going to perceive those frequencies. Now, the reason he sees red is because basically you've got two types of frequency. You've got blue types of frequencies, you've got red types of frequencies, like yellow, orange, and red. They're kind of similar shades. Violet, indigo, blue, they're kind of darker shades of blue. So you can basically think of, usually when you refer to the spectrum, it's a bunch of blue frequencies, a bunch of or different shades of red. And the middle one is a mixture. Like if you mix blue and yellow, you kind of get green. So you've got all these shades, but if you divide the spectrum in two ways, it's just blue frequencies and red frequencies, or different shades of them. So the question is, when the observer sees red, what happens is only red frequency or red shades, they bounce off the object, which means that the object is absorbing all the blue shades. So it absorbs all of the blue or darker shades, violet, indigo, blue, etc. It is absorbing it. So what you're seeing is the frequency that it's not absorbing. So when you see something that is red, then red is the only color that it's not absorbing. So when you see something that is green, then green is the only frequency that it's not absorbing. It's absorbing all the other frequencies. So what you basically see is a complementary color. You see the color that it does not absorb. So that's one thing. Okay, so make sure whenever you see an object that's red in color, then red or shades of red are the only frequencies that it's not absorbing. The other ones it is absorbing. So remember, you're always seeing complementary colors. Now the other question is, why is the object absorbing these frequencies? The reason for that is almost all atoms, they absorb frequencies. Why do they absorb frequencies? For example, if I have a sodium atom, and if I just draw those old, sodium has a total of 11 electrons. Now, let's talk about sodium ions in NaCl. It's white in color. NaCl is white in color. So what happens to sodium? Why is it not colored? So here's my sodium ion. It has lost its outer electron, and this sodium now has a charge of +1. Like in NaCl, sodium is +1. So sodium looks like this. So the outer shell is completely empty. Now, all sorts of frequencies and light waves are falling on this sodium ion, all sorts of them. And sodium has all these electrons around it. Now, we've always studied that electrons, they occupy the lowest energy levels first. But the thing is, these electrons, they can become energetic. When they become energetic, these electrons can gain energy and move to higher energy levels. So it might absorb a certain frequency. So all sorts of frequencies are falling onto this. For example, there's a light bulb that's on, or there's this screen of your computer, and all sorts of photons and frequencies are falling onto different objects. So these frequencies, they get absorbed by electrons, and the electrons, they kind of go into excited state. This is known as an excited state. So this electron over here, maybe an electron right in the inner shell might gain energy and jump to a much higher energy level. So electrons are not always occupying the lowest energy levels, because whenever you heat a substance, whenever you give it some frequency, some energy in some form, the electrons are going to gain energy. They might fall back into the, or come close to the nucleus. Then some other electron might gain energy and might jump to a higher energy level. So the electrons are constantly absorbing frequencies. Now, if all of a sudden one of the electron, let's think of this particular electron. If this electron absorbs this particular frequency, then this frequency is now missing because the frequency got absorbed by the atom. So the frequencies that are going to bounce back off of this sodium ion, F2 is going to bounce back, F3 is going to bounce back because they're not getting absorbed, but there's not going to be any F1. So the observer is going to see, he's going to see F2, and he's going to see F3, but there's not going to be any F1 because it got absorbed by the electron, and that frequency is now missing. So the observer is not going to see this frequency, it's going to see the complementary frequencies, the ones that the sodium ion is not absorbing. Now, why is sodium not colored? The reason is sodium might be absorbing frequencies which are not part of the visible spectrum. So maybe sodium ions, I mean, this F1 is a frequency that belongs to the microwave part of the, or maybe it's absorbing some radio wave. So maybe it absorbs a microwave frequency. Now, if the microwave frequency goes missing, you don't see any difference. For example, if there are no radio waves around you, I mean, you can't really see radio waves. You can't tell whether radio waves are there or not. So if the radio waves go missing, you don't see anything. You don't see any difference. So the reason the sodium ion does not appear to be colored is because it's not absorbing frequencies that are part of the colored spectrum. So the reason why transition metals appear colored is because the same thing exactly is happening with transition metals as well. When you have a complex, all sorts of frequencies are falling. I mean, there's light wave, you've got your mobile towers, they're emitting radio waves, you've got microwaves around you. So all sorts of frequencies are falling onto this sodium ion. I mean, this is a copper ion. So you've got microwaves. There might be radio waves that would be falling onto this ion, and there might be some colored frequency. So for example, white light might be I mean, all these frequencies, violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. So the thing that's going to happen is that this transition metal ion is actually going to absorb frequencies from the visible spectrum. I'm going to tell you why it does that, but it's probably going to ignore these frequencies. It's not going to absorb microwaves or radio waves. It's specifically going to absorb certain frequencies from the visible spectrum. Now, this appears blue. That indicates that blue is the only color that's probably not going to absorb. I mean, violet, indigo, blue are the ones that it's not going to absorb. It's going to absorb these red colored frequencies or shades of red. I mean, if it might absorb these. So when the frequencies, they bounce back, then only the yellow, orange, red frequencies are absorbed, and the violet, indigo, blue frequencies are not absorbed, which is why this appears blue to the observer, because the blue frequencies are not getting absorbed, the red frequencies are getting absorbed. So there's nothing special about a transition metal. The only thing is that the electrons in the transition metal absorb frequencies that are part of the visible spectrum. Why do compounds of sodium don't appear colored? Because they might absorb frequencies that don't belong to the visible spectrum. So you don't notice any difference there. But the electrons are always going into excited state. They're always absorbing frequencies. And the same thing would happen over here as well. The transition metal has all these electrons, and all these electrons, they would not always be in this state. The electrons would move around, they would jump around, they would go into excited state, they would absorb these frequencies. And transition metal specifically absorbs frequencies that belong to the visible spectrum. TK, yeah. Is this clear up till this point?
Yes, sir.
So the thing is, now the point is, why do transition metals absorb frequencies that are exactly part of the visible spectrum? So the thing is that this energy gap that we mentioned, I told you that the d subshell, it got split up into two separate energy levels. So this specific energy level, and remember, frequencies are always, they're always proportional to the energy. Like, for example, if an electron wants to jump from the lower energy level to the higher energy level, it can do that, but it would need energy for that. So basically what it would do is the electron is comfortably residing in this pink orbital over here. That's the low energy level. So if it wants to jump and move to the higher energy level, which is the green one, because there's more repulsion there, so it has to be having more energy, so it has to become energetic. So it might absorb any one of those frequencies and move from the pink one to into the green one. And the electron can switch positions. So over here, electrons are going to do that. And this specific energy gap is, it matches the visible spectrum or frequencies that are part of the visible spectrum. So one very important point is that when you talk about energy, and if something needs energy, the energy requirement is always very specific, and the energy is always proportional to frequency. Remember this always, that if something needs a large amount of energy, it needs to absorb higher frequency. It's going to absorb higher frequency. If something needs lesser energy, it would absorb lower frequencies. So for example, your radio waves, they're low frequency waves, which is why they're harmless, because the energy in radio waves is lesser. I mean, you can imagine this. What is frequency? Frequency is the to and fro motion, right? So imagine there's something that is very, very quickly moving to and fro. Then that means it's obviously more energetic, right? And there's some other thing that is moving to and fro, but at a very small pace. That means it's less energetic. So, and it's taking a longer time. So if something is moving to and fro in a cyclic manner very, very quickly, that is going to have higher frequency. So it's going to have higher energy as well. So energy is proportional to frequency. So waves that have very high frequency are more energetic. The particles are rapidly moving up and down, so they're more energetic. Just a second. Bhaskar, I'm going to come to this. So the thing is, that's the first thing. Energy is proportional to frequency. That means if you need a higher energy, you absorb a higher frequency. If you need a lower energy, you absorb a lower frequency. Now the thing is, when you look at an atom, the energy levels are very fixed. The problem is that, I mean, this 1s, 2s, 2p6, 3s2, 3p6, etc. The energy levels are very, very well defined and they're very, very fixed. So the thing is, if an electron in the 3s wants to jump into, I mean, although there is no space available at the moment, but if an electron wants to jump from the 2p to the 3s, then it has to absorb a very specific, it has to absorb a very specific energy level, and that energy would be absorbed when it absorbs a very specific frequency. So electrons are very specific about what frequency they're going to absorb. The energy levels are very fixed. It's not that an electron can absorb any frequency that it likes, because the energy levels in an atom are very, very well defined. There's a 1s, there's a 2s, 2p6. So they're very specific energy gaps between them. So if an electron wants to jump from the lower energy to some higher energy level, the energy gap that's present between them, it's very fixed. So it needs a very specific amount of energy, which is why it's going to absorb a very specific frequency. Bhaskar, is this point clear?
Yes.
Okay, so everyone just remember that an electron is not going to absorb any frequency. The energy levels for an electron around an atom are very well defined. They're very fixed. So when it moves from one energy level to another energy level, it has to absorb a specific quantity of energy, which is why it's going to absorb a very specific frequency. So coming back to this, your D subshell has split up.
And like, will it always be able to absorb that frequency? Can it happen that it is not able to absorb that specific frequency?
If I said so, it can happen. I mean, initially when we talked about transition metals, I told you that the transition metal ion must have an incomplete D subshell. The reason for that was that if the D subshell is complete, right, the problem would be, like, if there is no room available, this is not 1, instead this is actually, what if this is 2? Then the electron cannot move from the lower energy to the higher energy. It can't make this jump because there's no room available. So there has to be space available. Like if the electron wants to move to another energy level, that energy level must be empty. There must be room available there. So it won't be able to make that transition if the orbitals are all full. Is this point clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's not going to absorb any frequencies. It's going to be a very specific frequency. So we're going to write down now, why do they appear colored? Because they appear colored because the D subshell got split up. I mean, you have electrons are always jumping around, but they're always jumping around. The energy gap does not match the visible spectrum. It does not match frequencies that belong to the visible spectrum. So they might be absorbing frequencies, but if they are not in part of the visible spectrum, you wouldn't be able to see or observe any change in colors. For transition metal, when the D subshell splits up, the energy gap that's created exactly matches frequencies that belong to the
Sir,
visible.
that color transition that we see that makes transition metals look colored to us, does this happen only with the last orbital electrons jumping into the last orbital, or it could be any from the...
It's specifically because of the D subshell. I mean, all these other gaps, they don't match with the visible spectrum. If the electron jumps from the 3s to the 3p, or if it jumps from the 3p to the 4s, those energy gaps don't match with the visible spectrum. Is this point clear?
Yes, okay.
Okay, so
So if like an electron moves from like 2p6 to 3s2, there would be like no change.
I mean,
Like we wouldn't see any
color,
color.
you wouldn't see any color change because it would be,
Okay.
I
Okay.
mean, it might be absorbing radio frequencies, but if radio frequencies go missing, you wouldn't be able to see them. You weren't even able to see them before they went missing. So you don't see any difference. So remember, the color thing comes exactly, I mean, specifically from this d subshell splitting up, creating this energy gap, and the electrons from the lower energy d subshell moving to the higher energy d subshell, they're going to gain energy. And that energy matches exactly frequencies that belong to the visible spectrum. So this only happens in transition metals, which is why transition metals are the only ones that are colored. Sodium doesn't have a d subshell to begin with. So that's why they appear colored. So is the whole concept clear? I'm going to write down the answer, but is this clear? Yes or no? Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
He gave us Sam, Nadine, Hafza, is this clear?
Yes, sir.
So now another thing is, why do different transition metals have different colors? So the reason is that this energy gap that is created is not going to be exactly the same. Like sometimes this energy gap would be slightly higher, sometimes this energy gap would be slightly lower, because different transition metal complexes have different types of ligands. And they also have different, I mean, you can have a tetrahedral complex. So the D subshell would be splitting up in different ways. I mean, the whole idea would be exactly the same. But the thing is, in different complexes, this energy gap would be slightly different. So if the energy gap is slightly different, the frequency that's going to be absorbed would be slightly different as well. Sometimes the red frequency is absorbed, sometimes the blue frequency is absorbed, sometimes the green frequency is absorbed. So every time, this energy gap for different complexes, even if I have nickel instead of copper, the D subshell splitting up into two different energy levels, the energy gap would not be exactly the same, which is why pretty much every complex has a different color. Even copper, if I replace it with NH3, NH3 lone pairs would be slightly different. So the color changes into a deep blue solution. If I replace it with Cl-1, the Cl-1 lone pairs are slightly different compared to water lone pairs. So the repulsion is different. The splitting of the D subshell would be slightly different, and you're going to have different colors. So we just need to write the answer to this, which you're going to give in your exams. So the first one is, so we'll just quickly write the answer. It's due to repulsion. From lone pairs on ligands in the metal complex. And remember, this comes very frequently in every exam. So lone pairs on ligands in metal complexes. What happens is that the D subshell splits up into two energy levels. Into two energy levels. And you can code the energy levels if you want to. Electron from the lower energy D subshell so lower energy D subshell gains energy and moves to the higher energy D subshell. But instead of calling it a subshell, it should be an orbital. Lower energy D orbital gains energy and let's say it moves to the higher energy D orbital. The energy gap delta E matches frequencies that are part of the visible spectrum. So they're part of the visible spectrum. And frequencies is a part of the visible spectrum. And since delta E is proportional to frequencies, or since energy is proportional to frequency, H is a Planck's constant, so you can ignore that. You can just write energy is proportional to frequency since E is equal to HF. Hence, a complementary color is seen. And remember, a complementary color is always seen. So if it's absorbing blue frequency, you're not going to see blue frequency. You're going to see the ones that it's not absorbing. So that's a 4-mark. Usually you get a 4-mark question on this. So that's your 4-mark answer for this. That due to repulsion of lone pairs on ligands in metal complex, d subshell splits into 2 energy levels. Electrons from lower energy d orbital gains energy and moves to higher energy d orbital. And the energy gap delta E matches frequencies which are part of the visible spectrum since E is equal to HF. Hence, you see a complementary color. So we're going to talk more on this then tomorrow in the next class then, okay? So, okay, everyone.
Allah Hafiz.
Take care.